Alright everybody, we are finally here. A lot of y'all came to this channel, what, 2 months ago? Something like that? When I made my first ever Tekken video. And it was all in preparation for this very moment. The moment that I bequeath upon you all of this good old Tekken content. It will be constant and unyielding, like unwanted sexual advancements. Violently shoved upon you like a drunken prom date. But that's okay because you wanted it anyway, didn't you, you whore? At least you better have wanted it. I had to push back my Virgil video for this. And we're gonna start this tirade of content with this, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is going to be a video where we talk about the good things, the bad things, and the ugly things of the Tekken 8 storyline. Yeah, I know. That wasn't obvious at all. It was totally worth explaining that in this 35-minute video. Now, look, I didn't love the Tekken story. I had a lot of problems with it. So before I begin just tearing it apart in every way that I possibly can in what will likely be many, many videos, I'm going to give it its due by actually talking about the things that I do like, because there are things in here that I think were well done. So, you know, I'm not going to be a dick. And also, if you're new to the channel, here we talk about story stuff. So if you're expecting me to talk about gameplay and online and all that kind of stuff, that's not really what we do here. We're here to talk about how the story of Tekken was done. And spoilers will abound. So let's get started. Chapter 1. Yeah, there's really no getting around it. The opening of this game is absolutely incredible. This chapter not only has an unbelievable action scene and a really great introduction to both the hero and the villain, but also sets up Jin's character arc and Kazuya's evil plot that's going to run through the whole story. It is magnificently done. It's actually done so well that the final chapter, by comparison, kind of seems a bit lackluster. Like, it doesn't quite live up to this first chapter. And most of the fandom that I've talked to when the demo came out, which if you hadn't played the demo, it only covered this first chapter, they all thought hands down this was going to be like the greatest video game story of the year just based on this first chapter. It's a really good start to the game. If the rest of the game continued like this chapter did, you'd have the greatest story in a fighting game that there has ever been. Easily. Using the roster. So yes, this is something that's been complained about by the fan base for quite some time. A lot of people just straight up don't like that Tekken only seems to like using the Mishimas when it comes to their main story. Harada has obviously heard this complaint and tried to fix it in this game. And while I'm going to say it's not done perfectly all the time, the attempt to use more characters and make them more important to the story is definitely noticed. And with some characters, it's actually really well done. Longtime favorites that people have been wanting to see in the story for quite some time, like Xiaoyu, Huarang, Paul, and even King, make appearances here. I don't necessarily think that they're all used well or they're used the way that I think they probably should be, but they are used. And this does bode well for the future if they will continue to be used more in the main stories. Better writing. I read a couple of comments in my last video that stated that Bamco wasn't really trying when it came to the story of Tekken 8, and I'm sorry, I gotta completely disagree. They are clearly trying for this game. This is hands down the most cohesive and well-written story that they've made in the Tekken franchise to date. No doubt about that. Everything from dialogue to character arcs to theming is all done here in a way that you've never seen before in Tekken. Characters have had character arcs in the past, like Jin has had multiple character arcs. Usually what you'll see happen in Tekken is that Jin will be one way in one game, and then in the next game he'll be a different person, and they'll try to basically do off-screen character development. I think I can easily say that Tekken 8 is the first game in the franchise that actually tried to do all of his character development on screen, and it did it fairly well. I don't necessarily like the character development that they gave him, and I don't think it's the best direction to take his character, but it's by far the best done character arc they've ever done. The dialogue as well is much improved from past games. There are some things I take issue with the dialogue here, some inconsistencies and things that just don't make sense. Like for instance, there's a scene where Jin's about to fight Leroy, and Jin straight up says to Leroy that he's lost a lot of his power, and then after he fights Leroy, Leroy says that Jin lost a lot of his power, and Jin's like, how did you know that? And then Leroy makes some bullshit about him being able to tell by the way he fights. But you're just kind of sitting there being like, he just told you that before the fight. Y'all both just gonna pretend like he didn't say that? And there's little things like this that happen here and there. But for the most part, the story makes sense. It has an easy to follow 3-act structure with themes and morals and points that it is trying to portray to the audience, and it portrays them in a successful manner. Can't say that about the story of a lot of Tekken games. Action sequences. Now look, I know that there's a sizable number of the fan base that really wants Tekken to just stay a martial arts series and not devolve into this big bombastic supernatural science fiction Dragon Ball Z shit. Now I personally think that we're a little past that. Like, we've had cyborgs and devils and monsters ever since the original Tekken game. But even if that wasn't the case, this shit is fucking cool. The simple fact is that I like a good action scene and I don't really care what form that action scene comes in. If it wants to come in cool martial arts shit, that's great. If it wants to come in giant bombastic city-destroying action sequences, that's fine too. And Tekken has both of them. The same monkey part of my brain that goes nuts when it sees shit like this is the same part that goes nuts when it sees shit like this. And this game in particular really goes off with these action sequences. They're amazing to watch. It also helps that pretty much all the action sequences in this story are actually also used to develop character. Like every single fight between Jin and Kazuya takes time in the middle of a fight to evolve Jin as a character. They use the action sequences as character development. That's something that even a lot of good writers don't bother doing. So yeah, I'm all for this shit. More focus on the tournament. So pretty much all of us here know that Tekken means Iron Fist, which is named after the Iron Fist tournament. But if you've gotten into this series in like the last 2 or 3 games, you might not know that because they've barely focused on the actual tournament. Honestly, if I sit here and think about the last time they did focus on the tournament, I think I'd be sitting here for a while. I really can't remember what game it was. But 8 goes back to focusing on it. There's a whole chapter that's just based around the tournament. And it's pretty awesome. Honestly, I would have been happy if half the storyline was just based around the tournament. Much like my earlier point about the roster, I don't think they went far enough with focusing on the tournament. Like, I think there should have been more scenes around the tournament with different characters interacting outside of the fighting. But again, the fact that they're focusing on the tournament more at all bodes well for the future of the story. But if they do so in the future, I really hope they kind of make it like a Chunin exams thing, like from Naruto, where there's a tournament going on and you don't see all the fights, but you get to see all this cool story stuff going on in the background with all kinds of different crazy characters interacting and have all these sort of interpersonal turmoil going on between them. So again, this is the right step for the story, but I just don't think they went far enough with it. Angel Jin. I don't like the design of Angel Jin at all. I think it's just way too busy. It's got way too much shit going on. But the concept of having Jin turn into an angel is a cool concept. Like, one of the things that I don't like about Devil Jin and Devil Kazuya is that they're essentially the same character with pretty much identical powers. And I like the idea of all these different characters having all these different powers and abilities and stuff. Angel Jin gives him something that is uniquely his. He no longer feels like kind of a pseudo copy of Kazuya. I think that they should have pulled back on the design a bit and not made it so ridiculous looking, but I do like the fact that it exists. Just, you know, if they bring it back in the future, chill the fuck out a little bit. Honestly, I would have been happy with him just having that initial form with the one white wing and one black wing. If you wanted to give him an even more upgraded form, don't just keep adding shit onto him like a goddamn Christmas tree. Change his design a bit so that we know visually that he's more powerful, but I mean, this shit's just fucking stupid. And that's it. That's all the good things I can think of. I'm sure once I finalize this video, a bunch of other good stuff will pop in my head that I just can't think of right now, which is what usually happens. That's kind of the downside of not writing a script for these videos and just winging it. But for now, that's all you're getting. So, on to the bad. I touched on this a little bit in my last video, but I really don't like Jin's arc. While I've already said in this video that the character arc that Jin goes through is actually done relatively well, the arc that they chose for him, I think overall makes him a way less interesting character. At the beginning of this game, Jin is a self-destructive, suicidal person who feels that he is too evil to exist within this world, so he wants to kill himself along with his entire bloodline. And while I don't think that throughout the Tekken series this story has been written the best, it's definitely a very interesting character conceptually. And if written with this higher quality that Tekken 8 is written with, could have been really cool to see. But the arc that they have Jin go through slowly strips away all of these interesting aspects of his character until we're left with what? By the end of the game, Jin's character is that he wants to protect his friends. Everybody wants to protect their friends. There's nothing unique or interesting about that. Now he's just one of the many generic anime protagonists. I read a comment in my previous video that said that they really loved this because it basically brought Jin back to form. And I don't understand that argument whatsoever. Jin was never a person who wanted to protect his friends. At least not in any way that you can call it his main character trait. From his initial introduction in Tekken 3, his goal was vengeance. He wanted to kill the person who killed his mother. In Tekken 4, he wanted to kill his father and Heihachi. He didn't even know his father. He had no idea that he was a bad person. He just wanted to kill him because he saw the Mishima bloodline as evil. In 5, it's the same way. He wants to kill Jinpachi. In 6, it's the same way. He wants to kill a bunch of people for the sole purpose of removing the Mishima bloodline. That has been his arc since he was introduced. There was never this point where he was this pure good character who just wants to protect things. His storylines have always been about murdering people. And this is where my most controversial thoughts on Jin's character come from. I don't see Tekken 6 as completely out of character for Jin. It's kind of exactly what I would expect Jin to do if he got power on that large of a scale. His goal was always to kill one person, whether that one person was innocent or not, for the purposes of destroying the devil gene and the Mishima bloodline. Now that he has the power to do it on a massive scale, he does it on a massive scale. Neither his goals nor his methods of achieving them have changed. So the character that Jin is by the end of Tekken 8 is completely new. It's in no way a return to form. And honestly, even if it was a return to form, I still wouldn't like it. Because as I've said, my issue with it isn't that it's bad or that it doesn't make sense. It's that it's boring. The simple fact is that Jin is more boring now than he was before. And any argument that anyone can give me about why this arc is actually good that does not address the fact that it's boring is a bad argument. And I honestly don't think that anyone can argue that it's less boring. What can you really say about Jin now as a character? His entire characterization is just about protecting people. That sucks. Why doesn't Kazuya kill Jin? This is a very serious flaw in the story. And this is where the writing starts to go downhill a little bit for me. So we know what Kazuya wants in this scene. He wants Zafina to show up so that he can take Azazel's power from her and absorb it into himself. She won't show up unless him and Jin are both there. Because somehow, I don't know how, but somehow, he knows that Zafina doesn't want Jin and Kazuya to come into contact because that will end the world. Okay, that all makes sense. My issue here is why doesn't Kazuya just kill Jin at any point? Jin is currently depowered. He doesn't have access to the devil gene. If Kazuya wanted to, he can kill him right here at the tournament and no one on Earth could possibly stand against him. He doesn't actually need the power of Azazel. And if you're saying, well, he just wants more power, so he wants the power of Azazel, that would make sense to me. But at the end of the story, when Kazuya loses all of his powers, he straight up says he doesn't care and that power was just a means to an end, which is wild for Kazuya to say, who's been set up as someone who only cares about power, but whatever. So if he saw the devil gene and the Azazel power boost as only a means to an end, he could have just killed Jin and he wouldn't have needed the power of Azazel. Like, logically, I just can't follow his thought process. Zafina and Claudio's deaths. These were completely wasted. These characters were barely in the game. Now, I understand why they killed them. I've said in a previous video that both Zafina and Claudio should be two of the biggest threats to Kazuya's rule, since Claudio is basically Kazuya's kryptonite, and Zafina has Azazel, who created the devil gene. So in theory, they should both be very, very dangerous. By killing them both off at the very beginning of the game and having Azazel being absorbed by Kazuya, you remove the two biggest challenges that Kazuya has, in theory. From the very start of the game, everyone and their mother is saying that Jin is the one that's going to take out Kazuya. They all say he's the only one that can do it. Claudio has one good moment against Kazuya, but he's not built up as a big enough threat to really matter in the long run. We all know it's going to end with Jin versus Kazuya. So eliminating these two characters doesn't suddenly suck all the hope out of the story where it's like, well, how are we going to beat Kazuya now? We already know it's going to be Jin. So these two characters being killed here are just kind of wasted. From this point on, we know exactly where the story is going to go. Jin's going to have to get his powers back and then he's going to fight Kazuya and take him down. These characters could have thrown a really interesting wrench into the middle of this story and they were just wasted by being killed in, what, their second scene? It's just a really bad misuse of your roster. The tournament is made pointless. So I know I praised the game for putting more emphasis on the tournament. I still have to put it in a bad category. Because while they did focus on it more than they have in previous games, and the chapter where you played the tournament was really fun and you got to see a lot of cool stuff, by the end of it, the tournament doesn't really matter. It's only being staged so that Jin would appear, which would then make Zafina appear to try and stop those two from interacting. None of the characters there really matter. We don't get any interesting interactions between any of the fighters during the tournament. Most of these characters don't even have any dialogue at this point. It's just kind of here to fill up space. And also, this chapter is one of my biggest pet peeves in storytelling. Zafina has a vision of Kazuya doing some horrible thing at this tournament, so she goes there to stop it from happening because she thinks that Jin and Kazuya are the ones who are going to cause it. But then when she gets there, that horrible thing only happens because she goes there. Like, her being present is what allows Kazuya to absorb Azazel, which is the horrible event that she saw in her vision. The vision that she got caused the bad event to happen. So if she just never got the vision, that bad thing wouldn't happen. So what's the point in getting the vision? It's like her own visions were trying to get her killed. I didn't like it in the prequel trilogy when Padme died, and I don't like it here now. This was so stupid in Star Wars that people actually came up with a fan theory that Palpatine was actually projecting the visions into his head, which would make a lot more sense. And maybe if they did something like that here, where Kazuya had the ability to project visions in people's heads, and he put that vision in Zafina's head so that she would come to the tournament, that would maybe work, but there's no indication of that, and Zafina just got a vision that got her killed. It's stupid. Lack of character moments. This is kind of an expanded point to my previous tournament point, and while I do like that the game added more characters characters into their story, the vast majority of them are just cameos. They don't do anything. A lot of them don't even speak. They're just sort of there to fight people and fill in that role, and they don't really do much else. Like, in order for a character to be used well in a story, they have to do something that only that character can do. This is why I actually really like how Xiao Yu is used in the story, right? Xiao Yu is in love with Jin. So while she doesn't have a massive role in the story, her protecting Jin while he's having his vision is a good use of her character. It's a role that she fills that would have less significance if literally anyone else on the roster filled it. If someone like Hwoarang was there to protect Jin, that would also mean something very important, but it would mean something very different than if Xiao Yu was, right? Xiao Yu is defending him out of love. It's only one scene and one fight, but it works. Not only does she help the heroes win the day, but she does it in a way that makes sense for her character. There aren't that many characters in this story that you could say that about. Characters like Dragunov and King are essentially glorified cameos, and they actually do things that don't make sense for their character. Why is King supporting Jin? They straight up say in this game that King's orphanage is overflowing with children because of the war that Jin caused. Shouldn't he have serious beef with Jin? Why is he siding with him? Dragunov is with Russia, and Russia and G Corporation don't get along. Why is Dragunov suddenly siding with Kazuya? This just doesn't make sense. It's clear to me that they wanted to fit more characters into the story to give the fans something that they wanted, but they didn't do it very gracefully. And I absolutely do not accept the argument that there are too many characters to use them well in the story. When you look at something like Endgame that has way more characters than Tekken's story uses, and every single one of them gets some moment to shine that is based around how their character would behave in that situation, I just can't let something like this go. Something as small as a couple of lines and one good standout moment for each character would have went a long way. Also, where are all the consequences for these characters? Why is Law sided with Kazuya? We know that it's because he's mad at Paul because Paul didn't give him any money. Okay, fine. But you know that Kazuya is a terrorist who destroyed a big section of New York City and plans on nuking countries during the tournament, right? Like, he went on national TV and massacred, what, thousands of people? His goal is world domination, and Law teams up with him. Like, you can't just wave this away. He essentially sided with Hitler. Azusina's the same way. From the trailer of the story, I thought they were going to do this thing where she was like this really vicious businesswoman who was with Kazuya so she can expand her brand and didn't care about who she hurt while she did it. But then you play the game and you realize she actually thinks she's on the good guy's side. So she's a heroic character that's just dumb. Again, Kazuya killed thousands of people on national television. How does Azusina think he's a good guy? And by the end of the story, she's fine. She's shown pouring a cup of coffee for Leroy. Why is she not in jail? She supported Hitler. And it's not like they didn't have characters that would have made sense to support Kazuya. Where was Brian during the last battle? Shouldn't Paul have come face to face with Brian instead of Law? Wouldn't Brian have made more sense to side with Kazuya than Law did? It's stated in the game that Brian's whole goal is to have a world built by violence. That's literally what Kazuya is trying to build. He should have joined Kazuya, but he's not even in the game outside of the one tournament chapter. He doesn't say or do anything but fight Yoshimitsu. This is a massive misuse of characters. And the fact that none of these characters who made awful decisions get punished for those decisions is laughably cartoonish. It is a massive hole in the writing of the story. The ending and the cliffhangers. Alright, so Tekken is not a game that should ever have cliffhangers. This is not Assassin's Creed, where they have a cliffhanger and then another Assassin's Creed comes out within 2 or 3 years. This is Tekken. We haven't had a Tekken game in 9 years. If there's a cliffhanger in this game, it will not lead to anything for almost a decade. Do you know how many people are going to play this game and then die before they see what those cliffhangers result in? A lot of people. And honestly, it's just really bad storytelling. You have Reina being a major part of this game throughout the whole thing, and you don't reveal that she's Heihachi's daughter or that she has the devil gene until the very end of the story, and it's done in an after credit scene. Jin's reaction to finding out that Reina is Heihachi's daughter is infinitely more interesting than just the fact that she's Heihachi's daughter. Besides, everybody already knew that Reina was Heihachi's daughter. This is not that much of a reveal. So why would you put it in an after credit scene? It was so obvious from the trailers. And then you have the reveal at the end that Jun's actually alive. Why didn't she do anything during the entire course of this story? She's in the game as a playable character. You already hired a voice actor and you made a character model. Why did you not have her in the story actually do something? Again, Jun being alive is only interesting if Kazuya and Jin meet her again. Jin only meets like a Force Ghost version of her, and Kazuya has no idea she's alive. So her return doesn't mean anything. I feel like the Tekken writers think that just having something happen is enough, when the truth is that how that thing happening affects the greater world and story is vastly more important, and none of their biggest reveals do that at all. And on top of those really poorly done cliffhangers, why was Kazuya just left on the ground? Even if Jin took the Mishima Zaibatsu away from him, which there's no indication that he did that, I don't even think anyone was there to see Kazuya get defeated. Kazuya is still in control of G Corporation. He's still a massive threat to the world. Jin beats him up and knocks him out and then just fucking leaves. Why? That's the most dangerous person in the world. He's still a threat. You kill him or you lock him up. But he just leaves him there. The story's not over. Kazuya has not been beaten. I really hope that Jun appearing next to Kazuya is not an indication that he's going to go through a redemption arc in the next game. I am so sick of villains being given a redemption arc. And this is an issue that I have with Hollywood writing in general. One of the worst things I think Hollywood did to storytelling is making heroes boring. Hollywood's current, I don't know how to say it, I guess pussified nature means that literally all of their heroes have been written the same for quite some time now. Like, we haven't had a legitimately good, deep character in a while from them. So when they do turn villains into heroes, instead of making that villain try to do good things, they just strip that villain of all of the interesting dark parts of their personality. And when you do that, you're just left with a bland, boring character. That's why none of these redemption arcs actually work. There is nothing to Kazuya's character other than the dark parts of his personality. Do not redeem him. He's also the last kind of interesting villain that we have in the series. If you remove him and make him a good guy, we're gonna have to go back to having these one-off villains every game that suck. I'm sorry, I know people like them, but Ogre sucks. Azazel sucks. Jinpachi could have been interesting, but he also sucks. There's nothing to these villains that's interesting or entertaining. In the next game, write Kazuya as a better villain. Do not redeem him, please. Lack of clarity about Devil and Angel Jin. So when I said that Jin's arc is actually done pretty well, I meant it. However, towards the end, it does start to fall apart a little bit, because in trying to explain what Devil and Angel Jin is, they made it more confusing. I predicted in a previous video that Devil Jin was essentially a good guy who's just been trying to protect Jin all this time, and his rejection of Devil Jin was unnecessary and is what was causing all of these problems. And that actually ended up being the case. But my problem is how they did it. So Devil Jin just straight up tells him that he's always been here to protect him and guide him, and he's always been this good force in his life. But literally in the scene before this, he was taunting him, trying to take over his body and trying to dominate his soul. Like, we just saw Devil Jin being super evil and cruel in the previous scene. So what was that all about? Now, I can make wild guesses and just say that that version of Devil Jin was how Jin saw Devil Jin, or that was like his fears of what Devil Jin actually was, but that wasn't really Devil Jin. But again, that's just me assuming, because the game doesn't tell me that. The game doesn't even imply that. The only explanation they have is that after Jin beats that version of Devil Jin, the good Devil Jin says, oh, you finally faced yourself. What does that mean? So was that not you? There needed to be more clarity about this. I don't really think that they should have made Devil Jin just a good force. It should have been a force that always tried to help and support Jin, but not necessarily pure good, because how do you explain why Devil Jin tried to kill Hwoarang back in previous games? Like, Devil Jin has done some evil shit throughout the series, so just turning him into a purely good force doesn't really make sense. It didn't work, at least not the way they did it here. And I do not in any way understand where Angel Jin came from. I like the concept of Angel Jin, and I thought it was pretty obvious that Jin was going to eventually get an Angel Jin form, but how did he acquire it? Jun tells Jin that the Kazuma power is to support life and protect those that are close to you. And after she tells him that, he turns into Angel Jin. Is that a Kazuma power? Why can't any other Kazuma do that? Asuka can't do that. So this must be like the Kazuma power fused with the Devil Jin. But again, they don't say that, and it really doesn't make any sense. Is Angel Jin what Devil Jin looks like once it's purified by the Kazuma power? If that's the case, then how come when he purified Kazuya, Kazuya didn't also turn into an angel version? How did Jin lose his angel form? I get that Angel Jin purified Kazuya, so he lost his Devil Jin, but why did Jin lose his? He wasn't purified. Like I said, I like the transformations, and I like that they tried to link the transformations with character development that Jin was going through, but they still needed to explain how these transformations worked and why he got them. They tried to make the forms metaphorical. So every time Jin went through some sort of character transformation, he got a new form. So you could see the visual transformation as well as the character transformation. But they didn't link the two well enough, so I don't understand where the power-up came from or how it works. This shit should have been way better explained. Angel Jin and True Devil Kazuya were completely wasted. Yeah, I'm gonna stand by this. Why would you have them go through all this character development and all these power-ups throughout this whole game just to have them lose it all by the end? Jin has his angel form for one one chapter of this game. He just went through this whole journey, getting all these power-ups, getting all this character development to become this new enlightened form of Jin, and then he just loses it, and we don't even understand how he loses it. Where'd it go? Kazuya does not have the power to remove other people's powers. That's a power that Jin and Jun and the Kazuma blood have. Did he just use it up? Was it like a meter? Like he only had the Kazuma power temporarily? If the angel form came from the Kazuya side of his bloodline, why would removing the devil gene remove angel form? He should still have access to the Kazuma powers. Where did they go? Yes, this has a lot to do with the massive lack of clarity on these forms, but honestly, when it comes down to it, I don't really care. You don't have a character go through all of this to get all these massive power-ups to just take it away from him a few minutes later. I'm really hoping that the devil gene and these powers are not completely wiped out. Now, I think there's two reasons why they did this. One, I think they're trying to scale back the power level of the series because I think a lot of fans have gotten too annoyed with just how bombastic it's gotten. I don't agree with that, but I think that that's probably what's happening. But I do think it's odd that they make the most bombastic game they've ever made that to then just remove it all. But I also think they did this so that the Reina cliffhanger at the end, when we find out that she also has a devil form, would be more effective knowing that Jin and Kazuya and none of these other characters have any way of fighting against it since they no longer have the devil gene. So now Reina is essentially the most powerful character in the series by far. And that's not necessarily the worst idea for a story, but I don't think it's worth all of our main characters losing all their powers to do that. I don't think that's worth the deaths of Zafina, Claudio, and the depowering of Kazuya and Jin, just to get that feeling at the end of this cliffhanger that's not even a very good cliffhanger. It's kind of more annoying than anything else. And that's it. That's all I could think of for the bad stuff for the game. I'm sure there's more, but that's everything off the top of my head. You know, I should really be more organized when it comes to these videos. So next we're moving on to the ugly. Now, just in case you're not aware, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is not just a movie with Clint Eastwood. It actually has a legitimate meaning. And when you're evaluating something and you're giving the good, the bad, and the ugly, the good is obviously the good, the bad is obviously the bad, and the ugly is the stuff that's not really good or bad, but it's just things that you would like to see differently, basically. It's the things that you feel are like wasted opportunities or storylines that you think weren't really delved into the way you would like. Again, they're things that you really can't count as good or bad. That's what this section's going to be. So the first one I'm only going to talk about very briefly because I already touched on it, but the tournament. Tournament arcs are some of my favorite storylines that you can put in a series. They're so much fun, but the fighting isn't the thing that makes them fun. The best part about tournament arcs is all the stuff that happens in between all the fights in the background. The rivalries, the friendships, the enemies, the romances, all these incredibly ambitious and skilled people competing against each other for the top spot. It's a type of storyline that hands itself really well to having fascinating character drama. And in Tekken 8, they don't really do any of that. They have a tournament storyline, but it's just like 8 fights back to back with no interaction between any of the characters. I think this is a massive wasted opportunity. I think it would have been much better if they maybe cut that amount of fights in half and then had it be a bunch of cutscenes instead. Have like 4 fights where you could choose which fighter you want to play with each round, but regardless of who you pick, there's always going to be one canonical winner, and then have the story play out in between each of the fights. Give us something like a Tekken-style dark tournament from Yu Yu Hakusho. That would have been really cool to see in Tekken. And it would have been a really easy way to involve characters that don't have a lot of screen time later on when the war starts. Law siding with Kazuya. Okay, so I didn't put this in my theory video because if I put all of my theories in my theory video, it would have been like an hour long. But when I saw Paul and Law fighting with each other at the trailer of Tekken 8 and saw that Law was sided with Kazuya, my mind started coming up with all kind of really cool ideas. One of which being the obvious one, which is Law is a bad guy. Law for so much of this franchise has been a joke character where he's always broke and constantly trying to get money. And in Tekken 8, he's basically the same thing. But the idea that Law's greed and desperation is so intense that he would actually join Tekken Hitler in order to get what he wanted is a fascinating idea. And he would play really well as a foil to Paul. For one, they're best friends, so one of them turning evil is just inherently interesting storytelling. But also, Paul and Law are very similar characters. Paul is obsessed with recognition and fame. He wants to be the strongest fighter in the universe because he wants the recognition that he feels like he earned. He's obsessed with obtaining it. It's a very unhealthy goal that he has. But deep down, Paul is still a good person. Law is obsessed with money, and by having him side with Kazuya, I thought they were going to use him as a foil to Paul, whereas they are both obsessed with something that is unhealthy for them, but the difference between the two is that one is not willing to sacrifice their morals for that obsession and the other one is. This could have created a very interesting storyline where two best friends who are very similar to one another are just on two opposite sides morally speaking. This would create very interesting character drama. Sadly, they didn't do this, and it's not necessarily a flaw that they didn't do this, but it is disappointing. game. Also, fun fact, if Tekken did do this, they would be the only fighting game franchise that used their Bruce Lee inspired character and turned him into a villain. I don't think there's another fighting game that's done that. Vincent was wasted. When I introduced Vincent, I thought that he was going to bring something new to the table that none of the other Ravens have ever done before, because he trained them all, he's in charge of them, and he's the strongest person with the UN, who the Mishima Zaibatsu and G Corporation have been at war with. I really thought he was going to bring something new to the story, but his role just kind of replaced Raven. Raven has always been this representative of the UN who called the shots with all these soldiers trying to get shit done when they needed it done. When Master Raven came in, she did the same thing, just kind of replacing Raven. Now Vincent came in and did the exact same thing, and I just don't really see the point of his character. I understand that he's a higher rank than Raven and Master Raven, I get that, but structurally speaking, as far as the story goes, his role is the exact same. There are 3 great powers in the world of Tekken: the Mishima Zaibatsu, G Corporation, and the UN. And Vincent is 1/3 of that puzzle piece. He's in charge of the Ravens, who are the fighting arm of the UN. He's been influencing the story behind the scenes all the way back since Tekken 5. And he's in charge of training all of the greatest warriors of the UN that have been fighting against these two forces since the beginning. His presence in the story should have sent a shockwave across the entire Tekken world, but it didn't. He's just kind of there, and that's disappointing. Like, this is the top guy in the entirety of the UN. He just seemed like he should have been a bigger deal than he was. Jun's return. Yeah, this was another one that was completely wasted. She was here. Why didn't she meet up with Kazuya at any point? It's revealed at the end of the game that she's alive and well, so why didn't she do anything? The fact that we didn't get anything between Kazuya and Jun in this entire game is a massive letdown. The game is clearly trying to give people what they want, and when Jun was announced, the first thing everyone said is, oh shit, we're gonna see her interact with Kazuya. It's been a long time thing that fans have wanted to see what the hell happened between Kazuya and Jun, because it seems like these two would never ever get together. It just seems like a massive oversight of the writers of the game that they just forgot that this is something that people would really want to see. Honestly, I would have even been happy with a flashback of Tekken 2 where we just see them interact that way, but there really wasn't anything. And honestly, I really wish they would have just done more with Kazuya's character in general. Character stories. I've said this before, I don't like the concept of the non-canon character stories, and I think that Tekken has some of the worst. Some of them are kind of fun or funny, and I guess those are okay, I suppose, but a lot of them just don't make any sense and are stupid. I'm okay with certain ones like Brian's or Steve's. When it comes to those characters, we see what they would have done if they won the tournament. This is pretty cool because it gives us an insight into their characters of what kind of people they are, in a way that we can't see in the main story, so I'm okay with those character stories. But like, what the fuck's going on with Paul's? Paul's character story just shows what would happen if he missed the tournament. Why? He made the tournament in the game. Why do we have to see what would happen if he missed it? So he misses it and gets mad. Who gives a shit? Wouldn't it have been more interesting if we also saw what he would do if he won the tournament? I would really prefer if they just made the character stories canon stories that happened alongside the main story that we just didn't get to see because the main story didn't focus on them. Like, what was Paul doing at this time during the main story? Or what was Law doing? Or what was Brian doing? As is, I'm not really a big fan of them. And some of them I actually think introduce really cool ideas that I feel like should have been in the main story. Like, everyone says that Shaheen's is very random. He saves Lily from an assassination and becomes her bodyguard. I know people don't like this one, but that's kind of cool. Pretty much every person I've ever met says that Shaheen is a boring character. Well, how do you think that you develop characters? You have them interact with one another. I think it would have been really cool to have one scene during the war where Lily was about to get killed and then Shaheen jumped in and saved her. Then Shaheen and Lily can like give each other a look, not of like lust or anything, but like respect. And at the end of the game, maybe during the credits or something, we find out that Shaheen actually became her bodyguard. This would then open up the possibility of Tekken 9 of these two characters getting closer and evolving and playing off each other, and that would make both characters more interesting. And you can do whatever you want with them. It doesn't necessarily have to be a romance. I don't even know how old Lily is right now, but it can be like a brother-sister relationship or a father-daughter relationship or whatever it is they want to do. But these are two characters that both need evolution. Lily's whole character has been just being obsessed with Asuka for years, and Shaheen is a brand new character that really doesn't have that much going on. But their base personalities, Lily's of being kind of a spoiled rich brat, and Shaheen of being this honorable soldier, would actually play off of each other rather well. They could be two complete opposites that build some kind of respect for one another, and it can improve both of their characters together. But sadly, this kind of interesting idea is relegated to a character story. And there's a couple of other ones like that too, where they're kind of cool, but they're relegated to these non-canon bullshit short stories that don't really matter. And I hit the 30-minute mark. I'm gonna stop here. There's probably some other stuff I can add, but I'm not gonna make this video 45 minutes. Besides, I think some of the ideas are substantial enough that I can make whole new videos about them, so I'm probably gonna do that. If they're not substantial enough, I'll make some community posts, maybe a short writings, a paragraph or two, just kind of talking about some ideas I got. So stick around for stuff like that. This is not gonna be my last Tekken video, but I think my next video probably won't be a Tekken video. No, I might do one more before I do something else, because I do have one specific idea I want to talk about. So if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon, please. This shit took me a whole weekend to do. Like, my weekend was fucked. I'm going to bed after this, and I gotta wake up early for work tomorrow. The things I do for my audience. Anyway, y'all be safe out there, you hear?